Okay, the first one is ownership, not government spending, will shrink the wealth gap. Tell us about that.
Well, when you think about capitalism, which you mentioned, the virtues of capitalism, and you're absolutely right, you have to couple them with the principles of Christianity, or what we would call Judeo-Christian ethic, which our founders knew, and knew that without that it would fall apart. You can't self-govern if you don't understand.
No question.
Personal responsibility and the roles of each of our lives. But in capitalism and in its virtues, there's freedom for all. If you know, the beauty of our country, what makes us so exceptional with our 3 C's, with our Christianity and our capitalism and our Constitution, is that anyone from any ethnicity, any background, any brokenness, any type of situation can excel in our country if they make proper choices in their lives. So when you think about shrinking the wealth gap, it's one of the ways that we shrink the wealth gap is by diminishing the role of government, allowing for people to tap into their virtues, into their gifts and talents, and then to put them on a table in a free society.
Yeah, I think that's the important point. There is a real wealth gap. It exists. There's a difference between black households in America and white households. There's a difference between what part of the country that you're from. There's a difference based on the education that you've had. Capitalism should be equal opportunity. It should not be equal outcome.
Right.
So tell us about the wealth gap.
Well, okay, let's look at the wealth gap then, because it is real. You're absolutely right. When you talk about net worth, for instance, in a white household, what we're seeing in the median is $170,000. In the black households, you're seeing $17,000, so it's only a tenth. But I also look at glass as half full as opposed to half empty. When you think about the virtues of capitalism, allowing for that equality that you're talking about, we are there. The difference in the black community and white community now is the black community came out of a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and then a welfare state, so you have to catch up. It's kind of like I was talking to one of my friends, if you learned a piano from 3 years old, of course you're going to be more skilled than if you started 30 years old. But if you learn how to play the piano, both of you can be successful in that. So what we want is equality in our society to where anybody from any background can put their talents on the table. And you don't have that with government. When government interjects itself, which has actually hurt the black community in shrinking that wealth gap, because when it interjects itself, it controls. And when it controls your economic destiny, you don't fare well.
Wow. Well, you pointed out in your article that we have spent something like $20 trillion since the 1960s fighting the war on poverty.
That's right.
Has the wealth gap shrunk during that period?
No, actually it's not, and it's so tragic. We are still spending, in fact, $900 billion a year in these anti-poverty programs. Anti-poverty spending in our federal government is a quarter of the budget, and the challenge for us in that now some are estimated $22 trillion that we've spent in this war on poverty is we have not moved the poverty percentage. In fact, it's still about 25% of our population. Different people, but same percentage. But what we did do is we destroyed family life, because when government began to do this welfare state, it had to set means test rules. Well, what are the rules to welfare? Don't work, don't save, don't get married. And they've kept people enslaved to government dependency. I lived in it. 7 years I was in and out of the welfare state, 3.5 years consistently. I know firsthand that their rules are don't work, don't save, don't get married. And we will continue to keep Uncle Sam right there making decisions for you. Decisions on what? Decisions on where you educate your children, decisions on where you live, decisions on even your food. I mean, even through the food stamp program. So it hinders people from being able to put their talent on the table and actually break the cycle of poverty.
Stifles liberty. It's
everything.